And I'll introduce my colleagues who are here with me. So we can start with Patterson, Collins, and then Grace, who I'm sure you're all familiar with.
Good morning.
You can go ahead and introduce.
Good morning. Nice to really meet all of you. My name is Maggie has said, is Patterson Siema, and I'm one of your trainers for today. I currently work for APHRC. I lead the policy engagement and communication. I'm really looking forward to a very interactive and successful day today. Thank you.
Thank you, Patterson. Colin? We can go to Grace. I can see, as I think we've lost Collins, but we can probably go to Grace first.
Thank you, Maggie. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all again, especially for those familiar faces, like Maggie said, and welcome to this session. I'm also one of your trainers for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. So just to start off, I'll just go through a few of the ground rules for Zoom, which I'm sure we're all familiar with right now. So I've just shared with you the interpretation feature, which if you still have any challenges with, I'd like to ask you to just put it down on the chat and we can see how we can help you on that. But just a few ground rules to make sure everything is smooth, we hear each other properly, and we're able to engage effectively. Just mute your microphone. Always remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. We would love to make sure for you to turn on your videos when you're speaking. I think this will also be, it also just elevates in terms of being able to engage more, because we've missed a lot of that face-to-face interaction. So this also just helps with that. And it's also good to see your faces. Then use the chat function as well, or you can always raise your hand to ask questions or seek for clarifications at any stage. So we're very free and open to that. So please, all questions are open. So feel free to share with us, and you can share it in any language that you prefer, of your preference. And then we just ask that you stay focused as much as you can. I know there's a lot of distractions around us. So we only have 3 hours, and we just want to make sure we all use the best, we optimize these 3 hours that we have together, and make sure that we are able to benefit to the maximum that we can be able to. So I would like you all now to go to Mentimeter. I'm sure, are you all familiar with Mentimeter? And maybe from the chat, I can see, you can tell me yes or no, and then I can explain a bit more for those who might not be familiar. Yes, okay, I can see Grace. So I'd like us to go to, no, okay. So I'd like us to go to Mentimeter. So what you do is on your phone or on your computer, you go to www.menti.com. And then once you go to www.menti.com, you put in the code that's on the screen. That is 810-4279. So I'll just change my screen to Mentimeter, and then you'll also be able to see. So everyone just kindly go to www.menti.com. And then use the code 810-4279. And once you put in the code, then you will be asked a question. So the first question is, which country are you currently located in? So you can go ahead and put in your answer. So I'll also do the same. And if you're having any challenges, just let me know. So I'm pretty sure we're not all in Kenya. So I'm waiting to see more responses of where we're currently located. Zambia. Mm-hmm. Mauritius. So we have 5 people who've answered so far: Botswana, South Africa. Okay, a few more answers. We can get to 15 probably. Yeah, about 15 to, answers. Mm-hmm. A few more responses.
Maggie, whoever is in Mauritius, can we visit them? We've been stuck at home for so long.
I know, we need, please invite us.
I'm trying.
Whoever is in Mauritius.
This is a
Maggie, I'm trying to join.
Okay, the mentee. Hi, Jabu.
Yes, Maggie, Eswatini, I'm trying to join.
Okay. So Eswatini, okay.
Could not found the code.
The code is 810.
04219.
Yes, 8104279.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No problem.
42179.
No. 4279. 8104279.
Okay.
I know I saw other people who have registered, so I don't know if there's anyone from Mozambique. I saw Seychelles had registered. I saw okay, great. So I think we can.
Am I coming in, Maggie?
Yes, you are. I can see Eswatini on the screen.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so then the next question is, in one word, describe how you're feeling this morning. So in just one word, how are you feeling? Are you happy? Are you sleepy? Are you tired? I know with COVID, we've all gone through all sorts of emotions and different ways that we're feeling. Oh, expectant. Expectant as expectant. Oh, there's a child coming, or expectant that you're hopeful for something.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, good. Refreshed, energetic, enthusiastic, tired. Okay, I can relate to that. That happens, especially in what COVID has done for us. Inspired, focused, excellent, perfect, great. Okay, so then we can go to our next question. What was the last movie you watched? Flash, okay. If you didn't watch a movie or you can't remember, it's been that long that you had time to watch a movie, maybe a TV series, and it could be a local TV series, yeah. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that's an Okay, Queen's. Somebody needs to tell me about Queen's Gambit. I keep seeing it everywhere. Everyone tells me I need to watch it. So that looks like an interesting.
See it.
It's good.
It's very good.
It's about chess, right?
Yeah, but it's more your strategic thinking and how chess works. But it's very interesting.
Okay, that's on my list. Oh, Transporter. Wow. Okay, yes. Those movies I watched a long time ago. Faith TV, Preta. What's Preta about for the person who wrote Preta? And you can also just chat if you're unable to speak. Okay. This is interesting. How to Get Away with Murder. Okay. I see some which I've also watched. Okay. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. At least it's good to know that you still, this is a sign that you, bonjour.
Oui, bonjour. Je veux parler à propos de Preta. C'est une série télévisée qui parle d'amour défendu, car Preta est une femme métisse et Paco,
that's the best.
Ok, et à cause de la défense de l'amour des parents, ok, Paco, l'homme que Preta aime, il a fait un suicide et beaucoup de gens pensent qu'il est mort, mais pourtant il n'est pas mort. Il a pu éviter le mal. Alors, Preta ne sait pas encore jusqu'à maintenant qu'il est vivant. Il est encore vivant, mais elle pense qu'il est déjà mort. Et là, c'est une suspense là et on attend la suite. Merci.
That sounds like a very dramatic movie. I mean, TV series. Thank you for sharing. Okay, great. So thank you. I asked this last question because I wanted to, it's good to know that we're still creating time for ourselves by watching these, creating time for ourselves amidst all the craziness that is in the world today. And also it's nice to see how you're feeling. It's always important to know how people are and their current state and how we can best support each other. So thank you for that. So to just go ahead, I'll share my slide again. Okay, perfect. So next, I wanted to just share with you that as we start, this is actually the second session of a series of training sessions that we are currently running as APHRC, and you will learn more about APHRC. You'll learn more about APHRC and what we do. And so one of the things that we really want, as you all know, APHRC is in partnership with SADC PF, and we are in partnership, especially in the SRHR project that is currently being run at SADC PF, and APHRC is running an almost similar project. And as a research institution and evidence, a knowledge broker, we are here to support SADC PF in the work that they do in policy making and policy engagement and advocacy to push forward for advancement of sexual and reproductive health for all. So to be able to do that, we are aware that we need certain skill sets in order to be able to influence change, whether social change or policy change. And so we came up with a training module, which speaks to your needs in terms of how best can we as APHRC support you to do the work that you're doing in the SRHR project in terms of being able to advance sexual and reproductive health in the SADC region. So the first session we started with is on media training, because one of the things we're aware of is that you tend to engage a lot with media to be able to publicize and make visible the amazing work that you're doing in terms of advancing SRHR. This is the second session, and this session will be more of how do you communicate evidence for policy, because we know evidence plays a very core and integral part in decision making. So it's how do you best use that information in a way that can be able to influence policy. And sort of take away all the jargon and simplify it such that it's user-friendly and it's user-friendly. So that's the second session. So this is what we're doing today. And then we're going to keep building up on this. So on the 27th, we're going to have another session. It's on how to develop content for media. So depending on the kind of media you want, and one of the main, in the previous session, social media was one of the areas that was highlighted in terms of how do you tap into social media in the best way possible to be able to publicize and make visible the work that you're doing. So whether it's also developing content for traditional media like newspapers, radio, and so on. So that's what we will be highlighting. And then finally, as Christmas is coming, which I know hopefully the Christmas break will be something everyone is looking forward to. On the 9th of December, we'll now be having a more, I would say, more technical training in terms of now how do you actually, the fundamentals of the research process. And especially because most of you might not be conducting what I would call primary research from scratch. What you mainly do is synthesize a lot of what exists, a lot of information that exists out there. So it's how do you synthesize this information in a more effective manner? What are the tools that you need to use to make sure that even what you come up with in the end is quality, is credible, is reliable, and is up to date? So then that's what we'll be going through on the 9th. With that said, I will leave it here, and I will now like to hand it over to Patterson, who will take you through the next session. So thank you. And maybe even as we go ahead, I noticed we haven't written down the names. I know we can see each other's names on the screen, but also feel free to write on the chat your name, where you're coming from, how you're feeling, just as we go ahead. So thank you so much, and over to you, Patterson.
Thank you, Maggie. Quite excited to be here. And thank you to the participants. Today is a great day. We shall be talking about evidence for policy action. Ultimately, everything that we do, we try to influence some level of action. And this level of action by policy actors will then be able to help our people improve their lives in whatever way they will prefer. And so communication becomes a very, very critical aspect of driving policy change. Just like even when a child is born, the first thing the child does is to cry. That is a form of communication. They are seeking to let the people know that there is something. If the diapers are wet, they will actually cry. But the second thing the child learns to do is actually to laugh. They will giggle, they will show happiness, they will smile. That is a form of feedback, letting people know that they are happy, they are comfortable, that they're enjoying life. And that is the essence of communication. We must be able to pass a message and also be able to get the feedback. And to us, the feedback that we look for is transformed societies, because we have communicated specific evidence. And that evidence has actually then been able to be used by policy actors and policy makers to be able to effect change that then translates into improved lives. And that is why we all have these big agendas, the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030, the African Union Agenda 2063. They're all trying to see how can we make the world a better place for humanity and all the things that live on this world. So I will be talking much more about this. And Maggie, you could go to the next slide. So today's training will actually look at areas such as to enhance the capacity of parliamentary staff in tracking and engaging sexual reproductive health and rights. But how do we do this? We need to be able to actually carry out a very good stakeholder mapping We should have the capacity to develop policy briefs, fact sheets. We need to also know the difference between the two, and our team will be talking about that. And also, how then do we disseminate this evidence? We're also looking at communication for sexual reproductive health and rights, including content development for the media, articles. How do you write articles for the media? Reports, how do they make those reports being able to be read? Speeches. Many times you're given a chance to actually draft a speech or deliver a speech. How do you try to ensure that that speech is actually delivered well? Then we're living in modern times where social media has become sort of a disruptor in the environment of media. So how do we work on social media? Photography and video. Many people keep on talking about the picture speaks 1,000 words, but do we really know how to produce that picture that can actually speak 1,000 words? Videos, are we still producing videos that are almost like a movie length, or are we doing short videos that are actually impactful? And how do you link that to the messaging that you're developing? And also public speaking, when you are given a chance to speak to a high school kids, how do you speak to them? If you're given a chance to speak to the community, how do you engage with the community? So those are the objectives of the training that we are having today. And I want to consider it much more of an exchange, because I'm very much aware that a majority of you are actually experts in these areas. And because of that, you already have encountered certain challenges. You have looked at areas that have been very, very instrumental for you. You know what works. But so we want to learn as well from you, and we want you to exchange some of those ideas so that we can be aware of what is it that works on the ground. Communication is not an area where you can say one size fits all. It depends on the audience that you're looking for. So and there's a short exercise that we'll be doing. So maybe we go to the next level, Maggie. So yeah, we will be putting you in to start us off and just to sort of get the feedback on the on where we all are at. We will put you in small groups where we have like 4 questions that we'll expect you to talk through. The first one is what are the types of communication that you have used in your work? So this looks at everything that you work for in your work. It could be presentation, it could be reports, it could be briefs, it could be memos, it could be media interviews, it could be social media, it could be Zoom like we're doing. So you can just list some of them. And then what mode of communication works well for you in your environment? What is it that works well for you? For example, what is it that if you once did, what communication model or communication activity were you engaged in and you're so proud of that you saw this actually led to the transformation of whatever you're trying to achieve? Maybe it was a presentation that you made to Parliament or to a committee of Parliament, and they actually adopted that. Or maybe it's having been involved in a media engagement or a campaign. What is it that you're most proud of? You could lead. You could actually list that. And then, what challenges did you experience, and what are some of these challenges? And finally, what have you learned, and what would you do differently? So I think we could go into our groups. You can actually, I think the screen will disappear. You can maybe take notes from the screen or take a picture of it so that you're actually able to discuss in your group without losing the questions.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Patterson. So you'll be put into breakout rooms, which will last 10 minutes. There'll be a 10-minute timer. So once the 10 minutes is up, it will automatically bring you back to the main room. And we have split you into the different, so we have different French speaking, Portuguese speaking, to also just facilitate, to have the interpreters there. The interpreters have the slides as well, so probably they would be able to read out for you the questions even as you discuss. So Ronald, I think we can go ahead with the breakout sessions. So on your screen, you'll see a breakout session, breakout room. So just click join, and then you'll be taken to your breakout session. I can see a few more people are still in the main room. Just join the breakout session. Hi, Ronald. Hello. Is Ronald on the here? Paulina. Hello. Hi, Kurasha.
Again?
Yes. Is Ronald on the call?
Let me check.
Yes.
Is there a problem?
Yes, I wanted to find out the timing that is left for the breakout sessions.
Hi, Ronald. McGee is inviting you to the platform. There is something she wants to check with you. Huh? The APHRC. Well, he's asking which room are you in, McGee?
No, I'm in the main room. So
He's in the main room.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Maggie, I won't be able to join you. I'll
okay,
be
no problem.
listening in, but please a bit active.
No problem, I understand, no problem. Hello. Paulina, can you hear me? Hi, Ronald.
Hi, how are you?
Yes, is it 10 minutes over? I think.
I still see that most of them are busy, so I don't know.
Yeah, I do, but yeah, maybe we can just cut them short because of time. Yeah,
Okay.
I've just gone and I saw they're also busy, but we can just cut them off because of time.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Get it. Everybody's back now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ronald. I hope you had interesting conversations in your breakout sessions. I was able to go in and out of some, and I could hear very intense conversations going on. So I'll just hand it over to you, Patterson.
Sorry, Maggie, they should select the interpretation languages again.
Okay, thank you for that, Ronald. So just make sure if, you need interpretation, again, you need to select that again at the lower part of your Zoom, French or Portuguese, and always remember to mute original audio. Thank you. Over to you, Patterson.
Thank you, Maggie. Quite some very insightful discussions within the groups. Maybe we could use at this moment to have some reporting back. We could start with maybe the French group, and then we go with the Portuguese, and then English. So I don't know who will be reporting back from the French groups. They could actually just report back on what you discussed in the groups. Thank you.
Merci de m'avoir donné la parole. Là, malheureusement, on n'a pas pu avoir vraiment d'échange entre nous parce que malheureusement, la connexion de la part de Madame Geneviève de Seychelles ne marche pas très bien. Mais elle a pu me dire à propos de la première question et deuxième question, je crois, quel type de communication. Et chez eux, on applique très souvent le rapport, notes de service et surtout les communiqués de presse. Et c'est même pour nous ici à Madagascar. Et aussi la présentation, elle a dit. Et à Madagascar, on utilise le rapport, les notes de service et surtout les communiqués de presse. Mais on utilise aussi la présentation, mais là, on commence de l'utiliser très souvent. Et pour la deuxième question, mode de communication, c'est qui marche dans notre milieu. Pour Seychelles, note de service, brève aussi, et communiqué de presse et présentation. Mais pour nous, à Madagascar, c'est le rapport, note de service et communiqué de presse, comme je viens de dire. Et pour les troisième questions et quatrième questions, on n'a pas pu être avec Seychelles. Alors, je vais donner ce qui se passe chez nous à Madagascar. Pour la troisième question, quels sont les défis auxquels vous êtes confrontés là? Grâce aux visioconférences, on a pu apprendre beaucoup de choses, surtout à propos de la présentation. Et on essaie de commencer à faire des présentations. Et pour la quatrième question, nous avons appris beaucoup de choses et nous aimerons utiliser différemment notre mode notre mode d'application pour la présentation. Là, on a appris que pour mieux présenter ce qu'on veut vraiment dire aux participants, surtout aux membres, aux députés, là, on utilise l'application de PowerPoint. Et là, pour présenter des images et tout cela. Merci de m'avoir écouté.
Thank you very much. Those are very good, insightful information. It's very good to note that you're already using some very powerful tools like presentations, that you're using the media, you're sending out press statements, and that you're actually adapting to the new changes that are taking place, including using of webinars. These are things that have actually enabled us to continue working, even in such a case of a pandemic. And the reality is that this will also shape the future of how we are going to communicate. Thank you so much. Maybe we could now hear from the Portuguese team now, and then we could progress to the last team of English. Thank you so much. Who is presenting for the Portuguese team? Who's reporting back? Who was in the Portuguese team to report back for us, please? Or maybe as they organize themselves, we could have someone from the English group, English-speaking group.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. Ifoma, are you there or I continue? We had our presentations.
Go on.
Yes, please. We noted that with the type of communication, true, there are dynamisms in Parliament, but we use for internal communication, there's what we call minutes, where we want to communicate always with the leadership to respect protocol and procedure. because we don't just do things from the air. We also had in common the use of briefs, monthly, quarterly reporting. We also have the issue of reports, the issue of reporting, as well as some other presentations in terms of PowerPoint presentations. In terms of the mode, there is high usage of emails, there is high usage of telephones, as well as the issue of meeting minutes, which is highly used, we noted across. And we have issue of media, bulletins, press releases as well, which are highly in usage. We experienced a lot of challenges. For one, the issue of COVID, we are in a session where when we are organizing virtuals, the problem of link for members to join, you find that no one is available due to their tight schedule. There is no monitoring on the other end because they are not in Pali. We also noted difficulties of always starting sessions very late as per timed. We also note the issue of Parliament getting into recess, especially this time of the year. Some are on state duties, some are just sine die. So we cannot go on with our activities from November, December, January, February. And when we reopen, some parliaments are on budget sessions. So you find that with our work is going to be retarded until next year, and communication will be non-functional. There will be just no session taking place. And also, we also noted with our new researchers in some people in Parliament are just not interested in the project. There are no working relationships. Some of us are new in the political environment. Some researchers just reported that it is not easy, and you find that there is no cooperation and respect of protocol in terms of how we liaise with our supervisors. It's so discouraging how we receive perception of what we want to see ongoing, especially with the new researchers. With the learning part, we've been empowered all as researchers, the trainings, especially by SADC PF, as well as APHRC, which is not the first one as we are speaking, has been an eye-opener. The other one we had was on issues of budgeting and monitoring and tracking of our activities. We learned a lot. We've been empowered. We've been empowered even on issues of ICT, how to best utilize virtuals, social networking, as well as webinar sessions. Even today, we're exposed to something new. The program we are using, it's the first time of its kind, even the methodology we are using. So we want to believe that we're going to learn more. And we have a concern with briefs. We want to hear more on how we can capture and craft or formulate our briefs, and instead of using face-to-face interactions. There is a lot, and we also shared that we are planning on having resource mobilization sessions and have capacity training initiatives with our media personnel so that we can assist them in terms of preventing partial reporting and see them being empowered and being assets of our countries and for the program as well. I think I can end there. We had a lot in common as colleagues and researchers in English. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That is very, very well received. Indeed, new challenges, new opportunities, but also how do we continue interacting with people, like when they have, the members have gone on a very long interactive, and how to develop briefs that actually matter. And those are some of the issues that we will be discussing today. So I don't know if we still have someone from the Portuguese team, or if the issues are the same, but we would really want to hear from you. So with your permission, I think we could go, we could proceed because we've got quite a lot to cover. So thank you so much for that. That is actually insightful information that helps us set the stage for our presentation. we must have very effective communication if we are going to have the evidence that we gather from research impact on policy making. So it's not just about having very good content, but it's also more important on how you present that content and the modes in which you present that content. If you don't also present that content in channels that people are consuming, then you will actually have lost the audience that you need to speak to. So it's very important that we find ways of actually identifying how to present this information in a very good way. For example, if you have a research that you've come up with that is 100 pages, if you deliver that 100 pages just to the policymakers the way it is, you're most likely not going to have them read, because as you've all mentioned, they are very busy. They are competing with other issues like budget making. They're competing with areas with the communities. They're competing with the electorate. So it's very difficult to get their attention. So we have to be very efficient in how we communicate. Next, Maggie. And so this is where it's very important. So it all starts with having the right message. What is it that you want to talk about? And as you want to talk about, who is it that you're looking to speak to? So that is then the audience that you have. And then finally, which channel do you want to engage? And this is very important because, for example, if you are having an issue that is localized, and you want to engage the community at that level, or you want maybe there are cases of increasing trends of child marriage in a particular community, and it's localized maybe to maybe a district, you may then want to structure your communications such that it actually addresses the issues in that district. And that message should be made in a way that it will be consumed by the audiences at the local level. So this could be the different people. It could be the opinion leaders within the community. It could be the chiefs. It could be the religious leaders. It could be the elders. And it could also be the youth who are actually participating in this challenge. So what we do is that you actually have to identify your audience and then design the right channel to use. We are seeing a lot of localized community stations. They could be the best option for this one, where you actually work with the radio community stations, train the journalists, train the people working in those radio stations on the critical issues, so that when they're sending out these messages, they're actually able to project what is on the ground, but also give a chance for the community to interact and write back. It may be better than actually having this report launched in the big city, where then you don't have the communities that are actually practicing this child marriage interact with that message. However, it is also important that as you design this message, you actually speak to the policymakers, you speak to the parliamentarians, you speak to the government representatives, you speak to the church representatives, you speak to other institutions like civil society that are working here. But how you actually craft that message will be completely targeted and specific. Thank you. Maggie, you could go to the next one. So how do we then do this? What is the aim of what we are putting out there as communication? The first thing is that it is important that you need what it is that you're trying to address. For example, some of the data that we see is that 1 in 5 adolescent girls are pregnant in the SADC region. So teenage pregnancies become a big issue. Then you need to actually know how then you can actually structure that message. What are some of the solutions that you have actually put in place? Could it be ensuring that there is universal access to school? Could it be ensuring that there is information and training that is offered to these young people? Could it be legislation that has been put in place that if anyone is found with a minor, they're actually are held accountable for that? So you also have to put up in what information has been put in place. And then you also need to design what is it that your communication is seeking to achieve. What is the output that you want to see out there. For example, will it be improved access to information, or will it be improved access to contraceptives? What information is there? Are you wanting them to uptake more condom use, or are you asking them to abstain? So what is it that you're actually driving to? So you need also to map that out. And then also you must be very proactive, and the message must be very direct. Next, Maggie. So when you're designing a message, you need to be much also very aware that a message is actually the top of the iceberg, that most of what is happening is underneath. What is driving the agenda is underneath. It's just like a tree. What you have on top, you have the trunk and you have the leaves, but some trees have actually the roots that actually support whatever is happening. And so that root cause is where we want to address. So if you find that there is increasing issue of child marriage, you need then to look at what are the drivers of child marriage in that area. And that is what is not seen. So as you communicate, you also need to try and address, is it a cultural issue? Is it poverty that is driving them to child marriage? Is it lack of information? Is it practices that stem from things like sexual violence? So you need to address all those issues so that when you're crafting your message, you're actually in a position to actually address those root causes, so that people can actually realize that if we don't address these issues, we are going to continue having cases of child marriage. And if we have cases of child marriage, we're actually going to then force an entire community of young people to continue living in perpetual poverty. Because once they get a child, they are not able to access proper education. They then have a very early family. Their bodies are not very good and ready for that. They have health complications. And because of those health complications, they can also not work. So you actually compel them to a complete case of what I can call a cyclical poverty. And then they'll get children who will also stay in poverty. And you'll have an entire generation that is actually not able to actually lift themselves out of poverty. And that is how we need to be able to design and craft our messages so that they can connect with the people that we want to change and the people that we want to effect change. Thank you. Maggie, the next slide. So one thing I just joined APHRC about a year ago, but prior to joining APHRC, I worked for UN Women. And one of the bigger challenges that we looked at on child marriage was the realization that we all have policies and protocols, and governments have actually put in place legislation that actually tries to address this. However, we were still seeing that the numbers of child marriage were very, very high. And so we carried out a research and understood that it is driven by cultural practices. And this was also linked to things like female genital mutilation. And so we said, then who is the custodian of culture? And we realized that the bigger custodian of culture is actually the traditional rulers. And so we have, for example, Queen Best of the Kingdom of Toro in Uganda. So we reached out to her and said, listen, there's a problem of the girl child. How can we address that? So she then put together all the rulers and traditional leaders within the East and Southern Africa region. And they said, as rulers and traditional leaders, we are going to make a determination that from today on, we are not going to allow children to actually get married in our area. And so we then worked with people like Chief Chamuka and Chief Kachindamoto and various many other chiefs. Kachindamoto is from Malawi, Chamuka is from Zambia. And we actually asked the traditional leaders to speak to their national governments. So they spoke at the community level, they spoke at the provincial level, and then they spoke at the national level. And then had an agreement that this is something we want to pursue. And then they asked their leaders to table this at the African Union. Now, the president for Zambia is the champion for the girl rights child. So Chief Chamuka was given the responsibility to speak to the president of Zambia, and the president gave him an audience because of the role that they play. And the president then presented this to other members and heads of state at the African Union Commission meeting in 2018. And they had a pronunciation about this, and they all said by the year 2030, we are going to eradicate all these challenges that are facing women: FGM, child marriage, teenage pregnancies, access to reproductive health and rights. And so all this is a demonstration of how we then can actually work together with different traditional leaders and looking at the problem and being able to address that problem. We had a short video. I don't know if Maggie, you want to play that, or you want us to proceed?
I can play the video. I can play one video. Which one would you prefer, for Queen Mother Best or Chief Chamka?
I actually had, they're long, so I had put in another short one, very short one in the comments of the link. If you just click on the link, it will show us another chief in Malawi, southern Malawi.
Okay.
And it's, just play the link that I put up there, and you'll see it.
Okay, thank you. Let me do that. So that is Chief Chikumbu.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So what we demonstrated here is just how then you can tell that story from a perspective of a traditional or community leader, but also reaching out to the external players. And because of this video, Chief Chikumbu was actually invited to speak at the General Assembly of the United Nations. Okay, over to you, Maggie.
One woman, and even has even the men running scared, and her name is Senior Chief Chikumbu.
Yeah, well, since 2015, she has terminated 2002 marriages and has seen 800 former child.
Just to confirm that you can hear?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes, we can hear. Yes.
Back to school. Well, she spoke to our correspondent Sarah Kamani about the initial opposition she met from the parents who saw marrying off their daughters as an easy way out of poverty, and how she's using education to change long-held beliefs on traditional harmful practices in Malawi. Of course, for SABC, Sarah Kamani reports.
59-year-old Aida Dereza, better known as Senior Chief Chikumbu, confidently shows us around her homestead in Mulanje district, southern Malawi. It is this same confidence that she employs when administering her duties. She had worked as a teacher for just over 20 years, during which time something stood out. Girls were just dropping out of school, and the villages were teeming with teenage mothers.
Whilst I was here, I saw a little girls, most girls, so small, going into marriage, and it was paining me. I tried to rescue some whilst I was a teacher, but it didn't work well because I had nothing to back me up, to support me.
In 2009, a call came from the royal family that she needed to take up a new responsibility as a senior chief. She took up the position officially in 2011. She gradually started talking about child marriages, despite stiff resistance from the community, long used to marrying off girls from as early as when they turned 10.
Most of them saying we know poverty. Some was because of peer pressure. Others say it's because of tradition. I said nothing. There's no tradition which encourages this. I'm a historian of culture, but there's no any culture which encourages this. No. I was giving an example of myself. I'm a teacher. Look. You can be a teacher, you can be a nurse, you can be a doctor, you can be a banker when you go to school.
In 2015, Malawi's parliament passed a law forbidding marriage before the age of 18, but she says the fines are not stringent enough.
I don't like them. Because once a girl is married, it's 2,000 kwacha, which is just too little, and I don't like it. We were saying a goat from the family of the boy, family of the girl, and even the group, the village head should pay because he hasn't looked well after his or her subjects.
3 years since she began the battle, she has made huge strides.
There are 2,002 girls, families, those are marriages have ended. So at least about some of them, about 800, they went back to school. They are in school now. So I'm happy about that. And you know, out of those, I've got some who are in the tertiary, was university.
17-year-old Jennifer Phiri, whose name we have changed to protect her identity, is one such beneficiary. Last year, her mother forced her into an arranged marriage, hoping that she could earn some money from marrying her off. Word then got out to secret mothers, a group of women who work with Senior Chief Chikumbu to rescue the girls, and Phiri was saved from the abusive man. She is back to school and slowly adopting to life as a child again.
It was my mom who forced me into marriage because we were too many children in the house. So she told me that if I don't get married, she will chase me out of the house, so I had no option.
To break the cycle of poverty in Malawi, Chief Chikumbu believes the only way out is education.
Don't marry your girls. They are future leaders. They will do something for you and for the nation. And please, if you educate a girl child, you have educated the whole nation.
Although primary school in Malawi is free, the rescued girls add a strain on the family resources, and the chief uses her resources and most recently the support of UN Women to keep them in school. Every year, at least 15 million girls are married before the age of 18 in Africa. In Malawi, one of the poorest countries on the continent, at least 2 out of 5 girls will be married before the age of 18. Now, the government is employing the use of traditional chiefs like Chief Chikumbu to try and convince these girls to get back to school, and for men to wait until these girls are well educated before they can marry them. Sarah Kimani, SCBC News in Malawi.
Over to you, Patterson.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Really appreciate that. So I think to me, what that demonstrated is how you can actually take a very complex issue that is full of statistics and be able to project it to the media. How we did this was to ensure that we briefed the journalist well, made arrangements with the community, took the journalist down there. Sarah Kimani is based in Nairobi, but she covers for most of our SABC News. So we had to actually get her to the ground and be able to actually link her to what is happening on the community. So that is one example of what you can do. And based on that, it also demonstrates how you can also address some of these challenges that you face. And to me, it's something that I'm sure some of you are already doing, but we could also continue. I heard one of the challenges that was being raised there was that some of the journalists need to be capacitated on how to report on issues of sexual reproductive rights and health. And indeed, yes, before Sarah Kimani did this story, we actually had invited her to a training of journalists. So it's very important that you build the capacity of the journalist on the issues that you are dealing with so that they can actually be able to report objectively. Thank you. We will leave maybe a session. You can actually make your comments in the chat box, but at one point, of course, at the end of this, we'll give you a chance to discuss some of these issues and how you can apply them to some of your activities. The next slide. So again, the other challenge we face with at this moment in life is that when you open your phone, for example, if you switch off your phone for a meeting and you open it after 30 minutes, you will get so much information in WhatsApp, on Telegram, on Facebook, on missed calls, text messages. So your mind is actually attracting so much information, and you have to be intentional in what you consume and what you do not consume. So as a person who is crafting messages, it's very important that you look at who your audience is, What are they looking to know? What is it that is important to them? What does it make them get happy or uncomfortable? And how then do they receive that information? So that is just looking at how then you will be able to, once you understand this, you'll then be able to deliver that message effectively. Next slide. And so when you're looking at your audience, some of the audiences that you have, for example, it could be staff of the Secretariat, it could be advocates, these are the partners that you're working with, and it could be just a person who is concerned about it. It could be someone who's concerned about people not having access to education. It could be someone who's concerned about people not having access to knowledge. So you need to be able to plan them out, and then be able to understand what do you know about that audience and what are some of the ways that you want to reach them. What are the demographic groups we are trying to reach, and who will be the best person to achieve our goals? Could it be the donors? Could it be the opinion leaders? I have had a situation where I had to get the cardinal of the Catholic Church to really address as an issue that was critical. And by the moment he actually was able to mention this, the entire church moved in a direction that we desired. So it's important to understand who is that opinion leader that you want to help you change a particular issue. Next slide, Maggie. And then, so these are just some of the ways, and maybe later on as we carry out more training, we will be able to take you through how to carry out these activities. So keep your message very simple. Do not elaborate. For example, when Twitter started, people were asking, why is it only 142 characters? But you know, that is how the growth of Twitter was. People just want to read. They already have preconceived perceptions within their mind. They just need a headline to move with that headline to a particular area. So keep your messages simple. It should be unexpected. If you're working on a particular research, don't share what people already know. Look for that thing that is actually very important but has not been brought out there. It must be credible and evidence-based. It must connect with the people. It must be emotional, and always to try telling stories. Whatever video you have actually just seen on child marriage was, we had a meeting of heads of the United Nations trying to address this, but we needed to tell this story in a way that they could understand. So by actually putting the story of a chief doing something very important within the community and actually having a tangible change taking place was very instrumental in our fundraising effort, for particularly to support the chiefs. And you have seen the kind of support that has gone to people like Chief Kachingamoto in Malawi for the good work that they're actually doing. Yes, I've seen a question there about filtering messages to resonate with partners. That is very important. And actually, maybe you can go to the next question, because I'll try to address it like that. Many of you may remember this video. It started off, I think, during the Obama regime, when the Syria conflict started. And just before the conflict escalated, we saw refugees leaving Syria, passing through Turkey, crossing the Mediterranean through Greece, and then trying to get themselves to Italy, and then walk up north into Europe. Many people did not look at the statistics that were coming out of Syria as having something that will change the way they behaved. Then there was this journalist who was in Greece, and he snapped these photos. These photos put a story and an emotional message to the crisis that was in Syria and the refugee crisis, where European nations had refused to open their borders to accept the refugees into Europe, because they felt these are people who are actually coming to to spoil our country. They're coming to take our job opportunities. They're not good for our political standing now. We may not be elected because people don't like refugees coming into our country. They come with a different religion. However, when they saw this child, people realized it's not refugees. It's people, it's humans who are actually trying to move from one country where they cannot survive to another country. And this changed the policy that the European Union had. It's after these pictures were snapped and shared that people actually saw that this is a human. So when you're actually in the field and doing your stories, consider putting the human interest story first. And how did we put that in the video that I have shared? It's by having that girl who had actually been married, and she talked about her stories, how a mother, because of poverty, asked her to get married, hoping that by getting married, she would actually transform the family from poverty into prosperity. But then, as the chief says, they're only getting a goat, and that is not sufficient to transform someone. So it's very important to look at the turning points and being able to use visuals, videos, photographies, and stories of human to be able to transform a particular area. Next. And so just in that, Mother Teresa says, if you look at a mass, I will not act, but if I look at one, I will. And I just want to give a recent example. The biggest challenge that I see with the COVID pandemic in the world now is that the communication is based on statistics. Every day, the CDC for Africa releases statistics and says, this number of people are infected. Okay, this died. So they're numbers. You see the America, when the media wakes up, is like, we have 100,040 new infections. In where I live in Kenya, the cabinet secretary comes on TV every day at lunchtime and says, we have 3 people who died. But nobody is actually talking about so and so. This person got COVID because they are out drinking, and because they are out drinking, they exposed themselves, and now they have died, and look at how their family is suffering. Until that story turns, people will not take COVID to be something serious. And now it's starting to happen because people are losing their family members. So when you go to social media, you see people saying, oh, I lost my dad to COVID. Oh, I was sick of COVID, but I healed. But that is also the other challenge, because people are also having stigma around COVID. So it's important that we stop looking at statistics and focus on the individual. Thank you. Next slide. So in terms of sexual reproductive rights and health, what is it that we can consider some of the topical, we can consider the topics. We have the magnitude. How big is it? How many girls are getting pregnant? How many girls are dropping out of schools? How many girls are being forced into early marriage? How many girls are facing female genital mutilation? How many people are being killed for being sexually different? And times and trends. What happens? What was the situation in 1980? What was the situation in 1990? What is the situation in 2000? And what's the situation in 2020? What is happening? Geographical comparison. What is happening in Mauritius? What is happening in South Africa? What is happening in Namibia? How are countries doing? So those are some of the story angles you could take. Sexual health and outcomes. How are the different countries performing on the Abuja Declaration? The last time I checked, it was only Botswana, Rwanda, and South Africa that have allocated the required, that were on track to meet the required amount of money on education as per the Abuja Declaration. Maputo Protocol, great, it was done in Maputo, but are we really looking at the rights of women and girls in Africa? And how does that relate? The fact that it was actually declared in Maputo should give the SADC community the psych to say, we did it, and now we want to show the world what we can do. What is it that we are missing on the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, Agenda 2030 of the SDGs? Are we going to meet them, or is it going to be another goal that after 2030 we just move it to now 2060 or somewhere like that? What is it relate to issues of principles, human rights, And then what is the cost implication? In 2017, UNDP produced a report that showed in Africa, we're losing $50 billion, but not involving women efficiently in the labor force, making sure that women go to, women actually get married early, women are sexually molested and harassed, and so they drop out of jobs. Can we see what $50 billion could do for Africa? Is that something that we could look at? So those are some of the story angles that you could look at. But what is critical is that the story angle must resonate with your audience and must be authentic and from the grassroots. Thank you. Next. And then finally, we have the rule of three. There is evidence that audiences can retain three messages well, and all more this retention. So it's more about the overwhelming nature of the information overload that we have. The picture you have seen there, when you open your TV, if you're watching DSTV, you have so much that you want to put in. Even if you just maybe a fan of news, you have all these channels that are trying to force information into you. And your brain has to really work, get that information, condense it, and maybe then at one point decide what to retain and what not to retain. Even if you're a lover of football, you have all these major channels are trying to get that information to you. So what do you remember and what don't you remember? So the audience can only remember very critical, simple messages. Try to make it simple and don't go into jargon. Thank you very much. I think that's it for my presentation. Maggie. Thank you so much. I'm still available. If you need any clarifications, we could be. I'll be happy to report back and support you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patterson. And you've provided such a fantastic foundation in terms of beginning this session, and which has made my life and my work will be much easier as a result of that. So I'm just going to pick up from where Patterson has left off, and we've discussed what are the things that you need to consider when you're crafting and developing a message so that you can be able to effectively communicate what you want to communicate. So we also know that, and as Patterson mentioned, and as you also mentioned, I'm sure within your groups, that there are different channels which you can be able to use in order to communicate your message. Whether it's presentations, whether it's videos, whether it's short stories, and so on. So in this session, we're just going to go through what are some of the considerations that you need to think about when you're choosing the sort of communication channel that you're going to use. So here I've just listed some of, and specifically here it's focused on written work, written communication channels which you can be able to use, which I know most of you have already engaged with, already engaging with. So it's just to really highlight that the differences in terms of what is out there when you're writing to be able to communicate to your audience. Now, in terms of choosing your channels, it's important to first have that fundamental understanding of who your audience is, what your message is, and then selecting your channel. So in the case of briefs or memos, which is something which most of you have engaged with, so policy briefs. So these are more concise documents, and they're often standalone documents which are focused on a particular issue, and they're geared towards a particular policy action. And you find that most of the time, the aim of these documents is either to explain or convey the importance of a particular issue, to outline a particular problem, to highlight key recommendations, and importantly as well, to showcase in a summarized version evidence which supports the recommendations that you're offering. And you find that in most cases when you're developing a policy brief, which we'll go into detail in just a few minutes, the recommendations that you often give have to be actionable, and sometimes you could also give alternating recommendations, because the idea of these documents is for policy attention. You have to make it as clear as possible such that if a policymaker was to read, they can clearly see what steps they need to take in order to be able to put a certain action in motion. Then you also have summaries. In most cases, summaries are almost similar to briefs and memos. And I know these are also, in terms of outlines and how you write them, it could differ depending on different parliaments, different organizations. So, but most of them tend to have a certain outline, which is similar, that cuts across. So for summaries, most of the times they don't have recommendations. It's just a brief summary of the problem and the policy goal that you're talking about. Now, fact sheets tend to be what we call very condensed documents. And the aim of fact sheets is mainly to highlight technical and statistics, technical information, statistics, and data. And you often find that they're usually in 1 or 2 pages and tend to have a lot of visuals. And you'll be able to see that in examples that I'll showcase. Then you can also choose to have videos or photos. And I think, as you've seen in what Patterson has presented, like the photo for the child from Syria, how that elevates what evidence or what information or in terms of data is out there. And even in terms of a child marriage, the presenter said 15 million girls are married in Africa every year. However, 15 million can be very abstract, and it might be very hard for us. It's difficult to make it very tangible and make it hard for us to really understand what this 15 million means until you actually hear the story of that 17-year-old girl who was forced into marriage. And also not only that, by understanding her story in terms of the circumstances that led to that. So videos and photos can really just speak in volumes on their own. And then you have policy papers and reports. These tend to be very long documents. So this would be more, give more in-depth detail of what would be contained in your briefs or your memos. And again, this all depends on your audience. I'm guessing if so a member of parliament, a brief or a memo would be more ideal. But maybe if it's for parliamentary researchers, a policy paper or report would be more ideal because you want to get an in-depth understanding before you summarize your information. And then we have policy dialogues. And I think Patterson also gave a very great suggestion, a great example, in terms of how Queen Toro was able to bring all the different traditional leaders from the region to be able to have a dialogue, and specifically a policy dialogue around ending child marriage. So a policy dialogue is basically, it's where you bring in key stakeholders who will be able to influence policy to be able to discuss a particular policy issue. Yes, so in terms of the criteria of choosing your channel, again, this just goes back to what Patterson had mentioned, and it's just to reiterate the nature of your audience, understanding whether they're technical versus non-technical, the type of message that you want to pass across, what are your goals, and more important as well is the idea of context. So even going back to the example of ending child marriage, we know is happening across the region. It's happening in Sierra Leone, Niger, it's happening in Malawi, it's happening even in Kenya, but the context within which it's happening might be very different. So when you're actually writing a brief or you're choosing your channel of communication and you're developing your message, you have to make sure your context is very clear. Because in Kenya, maybe the reasons might be, rather than economical due to poverty, you might find that the reason why people are going into child marriage might be a whole other, might be different from an economical reason, whereby we've seen in Malawi it might be due to economical reason, due to poverty. So a child is sold off for marriage in order for the family to be able to get something. So you need to also be able to contextualize so that even when you're putting your recommendations down, you're putting recommendations that speak to what would be most priority within your context. So when developing a policy brief, these are just a few, this image is just to highlight what are the main components. So usually a policy brief has 6 main components. And again, this can differ. However, you find that these 6 main components sort of cut across no matter which policy brief you're writing. So here you first have your title. So the title always has to be clear. And in most cases, the title has to be engaging, and not academic, because academic titles tend to be very overwhelming and can be very confusing. So instead of what you would see in probably a scientific journal, you want to make sure that your title is something which, when a policymaker was to get hold of it and read it, it's something that will automatically engage them. Then you also have, next you have what you call your key insights. So in terms of key insights, here basically it's a summary. It's a summary of what your policy brief is going to contain. And sometimes this is good to have in terms of, because you're thinking of a policymaker who has very limited time. So maybe even if they do get this policy brief, all they might have time to look at is the insights. And the insights is basically the key messages that you want to be able to pass across. Then you have number 3, your introduction or your background. So here is where you really highlight that problem that you want to solve or the problem that you want to highlight. Then you have, you move forward and you have your recommendations. So once you've clearly highlighted what your problem is, then you want to go in and say, okay, what are the recommendations? And the recommendations need to be backed up by evidence, such that there's proper reasoning, to showcase that there's proper reasoning behind it. So for example, if it's about ending child marriage, and your recommendation is that probably to build safe houses for young girls, to build 40 safe houses for young girls in this country, then you have to have a reasoning behind why safe houses, why have safe houses versus an alternative solution. What is the reasoning behind it? Is there evidence that has shown if you build a certain safe house in this community or in this region, that actually girls will be able to have a place where they can be able to run away and be kept safe away from issues of child marriage? So you also have to make sure that in your recommendations, you have a proper scientific backing. And this also comes a lot when, even in terms of economics, when you're talking about costs, how much would it cost? So if you're saying, if you're giving a backing in terms of how much it would cost to establish a certain policy or establish a certain program for ending child marriage, if it's, for example, community awareness, how much would it cost? What are the returns as a result of that cost? So you always have to think through all that and make it clear when you're putting that recommendation. Then in terms of the 5th component that tends to be in policy briefs is visualization. Again, you find people are more attracted to audio visuals. So, and also it's a very good way to complement the written information that you have. So you have to also really think through what kind of visualizations am I going to use and how, and when I put that visualization there, can I easily interpret it, or do I need to look at it 2 times to be able to interpret? So you want somebody to be able to just look at it once and quickly see, okay, this is the trend that I'm seeing, and be able to get that message quickly. And then you have your references. Any questions? Okay. So we'll share these slides. So don't worry, we'll also share these slides, and we can also share a handout in terms of how to, with more details in terms of how to develop the policy briefs and what to consider and the questions each of the different sections would be asking, so that it can also guide you more. So here are examples of policy briefs that we've used at APHRC. This was one which was highlighting lived experiences with food insecurity among the urban poor. So you can see the visuals which have been used. You can also see that in this policy brief, we highlighted as well stories from people who are living within urban informal settlements and in relation to food insecurity. So here there's plenty of food in our markets. The problem is the money to buy it, which tells you that maybe food access, food being available is not the issue, it's money. So income might be the issue, which also will be something which will easily be able to now highlight to you what kind of recommendations should I put forward. Rather than say we want to provide and ensure food availability, then it shifts your focus to say, okay, so the issue here is cost. So now your focus would be, how do you make sure that food is affordable to all people? Here's a second policy brief that we've used in terms of, this was on education, highlighting the importance of technical and vocational education and training institutions in Kenya. So you can see it also follows a similar outline where we have the title: do young people have the capacity to wholly do technical, vocational education and training institutes have the capacity to produce wholly developed young people or youth? So it has the introduction, you can be able to see the visualization and the policy implications. Then in terms of fact sheets, like I mentioned before, it's a condensed document. In most cases, you find it's 1 or 2 pages. So in this case, we have a 2-page fact sheet. This is from a project as well at APHRC called Countdown 2030, which works with government, and I know they also work with parliamentarians in terms of being able to address issues related to maternal, newborn, adolescent, and child health. So this was a fact sheet that was developed last year, and you can quickly tell how that's a very short document. You can see the use of visualizations to be able to highlight what the key statistical findings were in Zambia. Then using visuals to tell stories, and this just goes back to what Patterson mentioned. How can you use visuals to be able to tell stories? So what we have done at APHRC, so one of the ways we have tried to make sure that our evidence really speaks to people and communicates that emotion, because that also, emotion makes people remember. When something touches somebody's heart or mind and makes somebody think, that's how you make them remember. So we have a research methodology which we call photo voice. So what happens is you give community members cameras and you tell them to highlight their day-to-day. So they take photos of what happens in their surroundings day-to-day. So in this case, it was in terms of food and nutrition, we asked community members, give them cameras, teach them how to use the cameras, and then let them be able to document their stories using these photos. And this just gives you, because the idea behind this is that what they would see from their perspective might be different from you as the photographer. For example, if I was to go in, what I would think would be important for me to take a photo of might be very different from what they think is important to take a photo of. So it really allows you to see it through their eyes. So these are just more visuals whereby, and what I like about photos and what is always said is that a picture can tell you 1,000 words. It's worth 1,000. Like it can tell you 1,000 stories. Like you can easily look at a picture and tell, and you can be able to understand what is happening without even having to explain that much. So this was an interesting way that we've engaged with parliamentarians here in Kenya, whereby instead of using the conventional method of even just having policy briefs, memos, what the team at APHRC did is they created a gallery wall. So this was just in relation to the right to food. So we have a project that deals with the right to food, and especially in urban informal settlements. And we use the same methodology whereby it's called the photo voice methodology, gave people within urban informal settlements cameras, and they took photos and they documented and they wrote what their journey is in terms of food insecurity and access to food, and just issues around the right to food. And then we created a photo gallery and then took, here you can see Honorable Esther Passaris, through the different findings using these photos. So this might even be an innovative way whereby in committee sessions, rather than just having the usual PowerPoints or briefs, you could decide, oh, let's actually have a gallery wall whereby we can actually showcase the different stories of the people. So when you're thinking about your written communication, you have to think about, when you think about your findings and what you're going to talk about in terms of your findings, it has to be evidence-based. When you're talking about your policy implications, the implications of your findings, rather, you have to make sure that they're very contextualized. Again, this just goes back to the causes of teenage pregnancy, for example, in Kenya might be very different from in Tanzania. And for example, in Kenya, maybe it might be just a lack of, it could be issues of sexual and gender-based violence. In Tanzania, might be a lack of information or lack of contraceptives and so on. Then in terms of your recommendations have to be action-oriented. So it highlights a clear next step, whereby if I was to read, I know what I'm supposed to do immediately. Now, when it comes to oral communication, I'm just checking to see if anyone has asked a question. Okay. When it comes to oral communication, there's also the rules of three, which Patterson mentioned. So always make sure you have one overarching message, and then you have 3 key points to share. So in this case, if our overarching message is teenage pregnancy is a burden to society, or for example, and then under this issue, our 3 key points is that one is that it leads to increased health costs due to the complications that these young girls face during childbirth. The second aspect could be an economic angle, whereby say because these young girls are getting pregnant early, then they miss out on school, and therefore they miss out on economic opportunities that will be able to advance them and break the cycle of poverty. Then you could have a third overarching message in terms of now. Let's see, in terms of human rights, for example. So your overarching message could be teenage pregnancy highlights also a human rights violation issue, because it could be related to issues of sexual and gender-based violence. So this allows you, when you're thinking about your speeches, even when you're writing speeches or you're making a public speaking presentation, you have to think about there's always one overarching message that in the end you'll always come back to, and there are 3 key points that you always want to highlight, because you can't highlight everything. So this is where now you have to learn how to prioritize what your 3 key points are. So always make sure the beginning of a presentation captures your audience. And I've seen people using quotes. I've used people tend sometimes to use surprising facts or figures. So for example, 1 in every 5 adolescent girls is pregnant. And then you can build up from there. And you could even sometimes tell a story as you build your message on and on. So it's always as well important to highlight what the outline of your presentation is, and this especially if you're making a PowerPoint presentation, so that your audience sort of has an understanding of this is the flow of how we're going to be communicating. And then always close and highlight your key points and any recommendations you have and your next steps. So it's always good that in any communication channel that you use, and especially even when you're doing speeches or making a presentation, that you always highlight what your next steps are, because everyone will be asking, okay, so yes, we hear teenage pregnancy is an issue. Yes, you've highlighted your key points, and then what? So you always have to answer that, and then what? So this is, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand. And I'm always told or reminded of the phrase that if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, then you're not doing a good job at explaining it at all. So always simplicity is key. Always remember simplicity is key. As much as sometimes technicality seems that it elevates, technicality might just bring more confusion and it's just overwhelming. So always keep it simple so that your message is very clear and taken. So just quickly in terms of data visualization. So as I mentioned earlier, data visualization helps to tell stories by curating data in a form that's easy to understand. So you're quickly able to highlight trends and outliers. And it's also a very good way to tell stories in terms of removing the noise from all the data and just highlighting what is useful. So in this case, you can see here 2 examples whereby we have an example on the most polluting plastic brands. So here I could have chosen, or whoever did this could have chosen to use a chart, a pie chart, a bar graph. However, in this case, they decided, no, let's actually use images to showcase which brand pollutes the most plastic. And you could also do this, for example, if you're saying, if you're trying to highlight trends in terms of, let's say, teenage pregnancy or ending child marriage, in terms of you could have people or girls to showcase who is being affected the most and in which country, for example. Then in terms of the next one, you can see how they highlight issues of maternal mortality, land rights, and just using visuals and colors to be able to draw your attention to the story. And then it's very clear in terms of the messaging. So for maternal mortality, we can see in post-conflict and in conflict areas, it's more than double the global rate. So that's a very clear message. Then it's always important as well when you're thinking about the visualization to use to understand the kind of message that you want to pass across. So here you can see two different visualizations, a red and one in blue. Now, what's interesting is they both tell the same story, but they tell the same story in a different way. So while the first one, which is in red, the main message here is that the war in Iraq is leading to a lot of deaths. The second one is actually saying that the deaths in Iraq are actually on the decline. And what happened here is that you have two different data specialists one who developed the graph when it's looked upside down, and then when you flip the graph on the other side, it completely tells you a different story. So this is just really to show you that depending on the message that you use and the data visualization that you use, you can actually be able to tell a different story. So for example, on the red one, Iraq's bloody toll, it could be, let's say, maternal mortality, deaths due to maternal mortality. So we do know that it's high, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, and maybe that's what you want to highlight. However, you could also say it on the other side, whereby maternal mortality is actually on the decline, which is also something that we know that over the years, maternal mortality has been declining. So you also have to really think through what your visualization is going to speak to. And if you also notice in terms of the use of color, and these are things which come with time, and we can also have more information and more discussion on how to actually think through all these different components, how the color red and the blue gives you also a different emotive feeling when you're looking at the visualizations. So in terms of some of the tools that you could use, you have, these are some of the free tools that you could be able to use when you're actually developing your data visualization. So I just end by saying good data and a motivating story will always give you a successful presentation. So it's always important to just go back again and think your audience, your message, your channel, and your channel always has to be in relation to who your audience is and the message that you're trying to convey. So with that said, I think it's time to have a 10-minute break. But before that, are there any questions, perhaps, that we can go through and then we can be able to go for a 10-minute break? You can stretch, get some coffee, and then we can come back more energized again. Any questions to Patterson and I? And feel free to put on your video. Chuma, I can see Chuma has a question. Chuma, please put on your video when you speak.
You want to see me?
Yes, of course.
You will find me in the toilet. Okay, thank you, Doc. Thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to check. I'm so much in love with infographics, but I haven't come across any software that can help me to do that. You see, the ones that you were doing for the portals and the maternal issues and stuff. I don't know. Do you have something that is not big softwares like what those that are used for graphics? The Corel Draw and what? Is there anything simple like we can use to simulate that kind of information?
Yes, that's a good question. So yes, we, at least at APHRC, what we use a lot is Canva. It's called Canva, and it gives you, it gives you access to quite a lot of visuals, and it tends to be free of charge, but there's also like premium version, but that's usually a good start, I would say. Canva is always a good start.
What's the spelling?
And let me write it on the chat. This is something as well, if you need more help in terms of being able to work around Canva, I think that's definitely something we would be able to offer. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Sharp, thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I see Leva. Any other questions? Okay, so I think I can't see any other questions. Thank you, Patterson, for sharing it on the chat. So since there are no other questions, then I would say let's go for a 10-minute break. So we'll be back here at 12:40. Yes, so you feel free to go ahead, take your break, take some coffee, and see you in 10 minutes.
That's
Maggie, that would
11:40.
be 11:40 for us.
Oh, sorry, 11:40 for you. 12:40 for us. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. So we're about to start. 1 more minute.
Okay, yeah, it's one more. That was a good presentation, Meg. Yeah?
Thank you.
I like those graphs. I think I will need to use also that canvas. I liked it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun playing around with Canva.
Yeah. Especially with figures, you can change. Eh?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Madam SG. And it's good to have you here. Okay, so I think we can start. So Patterson and I have talked about the audience, we've talked about the messaging, and we've also touched a lot around what channels to use. So next we'll have Collins, who will take you through stakeholder mapping. So how do you even further understand who your audience is and who you want to speak to? So over to you, Collins, and I'll just share the slides on your behalf.
Okay, thank you very much, Maggie. I really liked your presentation. It was quite interesting, as well as Patterson's presentation. So I hope we are all here. My name is Collins, and I work with my colleagues Patterson, Maggie, and Grace at APHRC. And for this session, we are going to look at stakeholder mapping or stakeholder analysis. And basically, we are going to develop a common understanding of who a stakeholder is. And we are also going to look at the process of undertaking stakeholder mapping and stakeholder analysis, as well as look at the importance of undertaking stakeholder
I think we've lost Collins. I don't know if Grace, you can hear.
I think we
No,
lost
we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, you can hear me, okay. So I know Collins has also been having a big issues with his internet. And we can just, oops. Collins, can you hear us? Let's just give him 1 minute.
Let me try to call him and find out what the issue is.
Okay, no problem. So maybe as Grace is doing that, are there any questions which you might have thought of during the break? Is there something in specific already that you've been able to identify that you probably would like further us to delve into more detail in? So whether it's in developing data visualizations, is that something that you're interested in, so that we can also be able to sort of schedule future trainings on just specifically that and how to use different tools to be able to do that? Might you also be interested in terms of even having a more in-depth and practical session on developing policy briefs? Because right now I know we're introducing quite a number of concepts, and even in terms of how to interpret, for example, economic data and put it down in a way that makes sense. So are there some of these things that you've already identified? So please just feel free to raise your hand, share, put it in the chat box so that we can be able to do so. So I can see, yes, data visualization training. So that's definitely noted. Okay, so I can see that Collins is having issues, so probably I can just take over as Grace. So Grace, I probably can just take over his presentation as you try to get hold of him. Is that fine? Grace, can you hear me?
Okay, he's joining we've got an alternate source of power, so let's give him like 2 minutes to join.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Meanwhile, for those who had not joined us in the beginning as we were doing our introduction, and you didn't share with us, we'd be happy if you shared with us what we discussed about how we are feeling, what our current feeling is today morning. We had a mixture of responses from people who are tired, people who are energetic, inspired, feeling hopeful and expectant. We also asked the question in terms of what was the last movie or TV series you watched, and Liva shared with us. Preta, I think, yes, a very interesting one, dramatic. It sounds like a very dramatic TV series that she's currently watching. I saw a few more people who at least are creating time for themselves to watch and be entertained. So if you hadn't shared with us, please on the chat, feel free to share with us how you're feeling today morning. And yeah, what was the last movie that you watched?
Were people responding in the chat box, Meg?
So people are responding on Mentimeter, but you can respond on the chat box if you're not embarrassed to say any of them.
Mobile, so it wasn't coming up for me to put my responses on the mobile phone.
Yeah.
Because I was using mobile Zoom, so I was wondering where are people responding, and I was seeing. So, but I was in the meeting. Of course, I was dropping out here and there.
Yeah.
But well, movies, I don't know. Maybe you can give us a summary of the other presentations that happened, especially around 10 a.m. thereabouts, leading to the breakout.
Okay. I think, yeah. So we can definitely, so I can see Collins is joining us. Okay. So he's here. So we'll definitely go through the summary, Chuma. Yeah. Well, welcome back, Collins. You're mute.
Okay, apologies for that. Had some connection issues, and apologize for that. So, yeah, for this session, we are going to look at the stakeholder analysis or stakeholder mapping. And just to mention, an overview of this session will be basically for us to develop a common understanding of what we mean by stakeholder mapping and stakeholder analysis. We will also look at the process of undertaking stakeholder analysis, and we shall also look at the importance of undertaking stakeholder, the results of stakeholder analysis and stakeholder mapping. So for an introduction, I would like to hear from one or two people what they understand by the term stakeholder, and also a mention of one or two examples of stakeholders whom you engage with in your project. Anyone?
Collins.
Yes.
Hello, Tim. Stakeholders could be the lifeline groups who supports, who partners for the well execution of the program. For instance, I regard the religious fora as our stakeholders, traditional leaders, civil society, the line ministries, and more. We can't do without them. if I'm right. Thank you.
I can see Chuma has also raised his hand, Colin. I think have we lost Collins again? Yeah, so let me just call Collins. Okay, so Collins is having issues with his connection, so I'll just go through his slides. Yeah, as he also tries to join us. Okay, so the question was, who is a stakeholder? Thank you, Jabu, for sharing. I see Chuma also had his hand up. So Chuma, yes.
All right. Stakeholder, I will just interpret it maybe the way it is written. Is somebody or any organization or any individual who holds a stake in what you are doing. So anybody who's got an interest, anybody who has a say, in what you are doing is a stakeholder. So for us, we work in the parliament, and we're doing SRHR advocacy, parliamentary. So every CSO that is working on SRHR, every individual, every group of people that are affected, especially those that are on the bedside of SRHR indicators, they are the ministries or the executive. It's also they also form part of our stakeholders. In media as well, media is strong stakeholders for us. They help us to make the work known.
Okay, so you've mentioned quite a number, and that's good. And I could even categorize them. There's government stakeholders, there's donors, there's international or national civil society organizations, and then you've also highlighted media. And just to go back in terms of what you understand, what a stakeholder is, like you read correctly. So as stakeholders are people, it could be groups, or it could even be institutions. And mostly these are institutions that are likely to be affected by proposed interventions, and that could either be negative or positive. So in most cases, we tend to think of stakeholders as people who are gaining from something, but also those who are not gaining from something are stakeholders. And that could be, for example, if factory is constructed somewhere, you could tell that, yes, there are people who gain in terms of job creation. However, we also know, maybe because of disposing of affluents which are toxic into the rivers, that there are people in the community who are not gaining, and those people are also stakeholders. So it really tells you that you need to think in terms of the diversity of who these people are, and in terms of how they also can affect the outcome of the intervention. Because if a community group was to rally and say, we don't want this factory there anymore, they could actually affect the outcome of that factory being removed from that specific location. So looking at it from that angle. And in SRHR, there are various different ways. And for example, what Patterson mentioned in terms of a stakeholder option is traditional leaders who have very key influence, and parliamentaries yourselves, the parliamentary staff, these are all stakeholders. So they have a stake and they hold it, and they often influence or are interested with that intervention. Then, and I can see Collins is also here. So Collins, do you want to jump in, or should I just go ahead? Okay, so I'll just go ahead. So in terms of stakeholder mapping and analysis, so it's a process of systematically listing and analyzing information to determine which groups have an interest in a project. Now, in terms of, interest in a project, which groups are excluded or included. And again, this is important because as much as you think of people who can gain, it's always important to think who is also losing, because those who are losing might even be stronger in terms of either opposing or supporting, especially opposing what it is that you're doing. And we've seen this a lot in sexual and reproductive health, whereby we have a lot of sometimes religious organizations which are very anti-SRHR and have a very strong influence in terms of how policies and decisions are made when it comes to sexual and reproductive health. And those key stakeholders that are important to consider. So whether the groups, support or oppose it, or will the groups benefit or be harmed by it? And so that's why it's always important to carry out a stakeholder mapping or analysis, because before you undertake a project or a certain intervention, you always need to be aware of who out there can be able to influence the outcomes of this intervention, whether positively or negatively. And what is also important is that you find sometimes it's a very dynamic process. So you might decide to do this at the beginning of your project implementation, and you would be able to identify a list of certain people, groups, or institutions. However, you also tend to find that even as you keep continuing your project implementation process, you keep adding more and more people to the list. So you might even end up having to remove certain people on the list. So it's also a dynamic process, not to say that once you conduct a stakeholder mapping and identify these people, that's it. You also need to be able to adapt and be flexible. So how is it useful? I think that's important to know in terms of, and it facilitates alliance building. So if you're looking for people who you identify your supporters, then it also just creates a stronger network who would be able to support through that process of where you have the opposition or any form of resistance, or even in terms of conflict. Then it also allows you to improve your understanding. It also allows you to improve your understanding of who to involve, to understand what their roles, interests, or concerns are. And this is very important because a lot of what people do is shaped by their motivation, it's shaped by their interests, it's shaped by their ideologies around a certain issue. And you have to be able to really understand what those ideologies, interests, and motivations are, and how to be able to properly capture them when you want to work with certain people, or even when you have people who might be opposing what you're doing, you also still need to understand what their ideologies are so that you can be able to know how to best counter and use evidence to be able to counter what it is that they're opposing, for example. So a project and a program is more likely to succeed as well if a proper stakeholder analysis is done, and it's done on an ongoing basis. So what do you need to consider? When you're conducting a stakeholder analysis, power dynamics are very important to consider because you find it's a lot about it's a lot about power issues. Who has the power to decide? Who has the power to make this change? And you also have to consider links and relationships. How are they related to? What are the network? What is sort of the network flow between the different people, and how are the relationships shaped? So, for example, between the church and the government, is there a strong relationship? And that could mean, in terms of even the influence of how policies are directed. Is it so? Those, and I guess, for example, in Zambia, where it's a Christian nation, if I'm not wrong, that relationship, those links are very strong in terms of how they would influence certain outcomes. Then you also have to consider the levels of influence. So not everyone will have, depending on the influence you want, so not everyone perhaps would have that power to make the decision, but there are different people who could be able to influence others in order to be able to have a certain decision made. So you also have to consider that, where they align and what their interests are. So I'm not sure how clear this is, but this just gives you a brief outline of what a stakeholder mapping process looks like. And it's always important that as you start, you always define what your scope is in terms of what your topic is. It could be your project, it could be the scope of your output. And also, what level is this? What level are you looking at? Are you looking at the global level? Are you looking to influence the regional or even the local level? And then you also have to define your objectives. So you want to define what your policy or communications objective is. So for example, in this case, your objective would be to advance the implementation of the Maputo Protocol, specifically on issues on unsafe abortion, or specifically on issues on adolescent sexual reproductive health. So having a very clear policy objective helps to make sure that you align your efforts to in a specific direction. Then you also now, once you've identified your objective, now here's where comes the aspect of identifying and brainstorming who these potential people, groups, organizations, or networks are in relation to your objective, because that will always form the base of who we're looking to work with. Then once you've done that, then it's always important to now categorize who these people are. So, and like Chuma had mentioned earlier on, that you could either be, it could be government individuals, it could be media, it could be donors, it could be youth, it could be community-based organizations, etc. It helps to just get an idea of what the overarching groups that you're looking to work with. Then also helps to visualize relationships and links between stakeholders, and they're different, and this will come to in a few minutes, whereby there are different tools which you can use in stakeholder mapping process, and we'll go through a few, but there's also one called network analysis, where you actually visualize different groups of people. So for example, you might have government, you might have donors, and then you might have media, and you have arrows which link depending on the different issues to show how each of the different stakeholders are linked to each other. Then the next step, once you've been able to visualize these stakeholders, is how do you rank them? Ranking especially in terms of, it could be in terms of power, the power that they have to actually make decisions. It could be ranking them in terms of their interest on the particular topic, their level of interest. Some might have low, some might have high, their attitude towards the topic, and how they align towards the topic. And once you do that, now you sit back and now start analyzing, okay, so we've been able to identify that these certain stakeholders have this amount of power, this amount of influence, or so now in terms of how do you want them to actually change? So we have an understanding of this is what their interest is, this is what their power is. Now, how do you want to engage them towards being able to achieve a certain policy objective? Then at that point, now you start developing key strategies to each of the different audiences and how to engage them, and also have that process of prioritizing depending on what it is that you're looking for. Is everything clear? I'll stop there because I now have talked for quite a bit. I don't see any questions on the chat, but even if you have a question, just unmute and then speak, and then I'll be able to hear and stop and answer. So this is one way of ranking your stakeholders. This is the stakeholder mapping matrix. And we can definitely give more information on this in a handout if that's something that you're interested in. But in this case, for example, you have your chart that tells you in terms of power, you're ranking them based on power, and power is people who can make the decisions such that tomorrow somebody can wake up and say, okay, we're changing the guidelines on management of teenage pregnancies. So we're changing the policy and saying, you cannot marry anyone who's below the age of 18. So that's how you think of power. Then in terms of interest is this something that they're actually interested in? And this would mean that you need to also know what kind of motivations would allow them to be interested in this topic. So for example, and I'll go back to one of the stakeholders Chuma mentioned, the Ministry of Health. And let's say you're dealing with issues of teenage pregnancy. Where would you, and everyone actually can just type on the chat. It would be nice to just type on the chat, where would you place the Ministry of Health? In this matrix, would you place the Ministry Ministry of Health as somebody you want to keep satisfied. So that means that for people who have high power but low interest, it means because they're not interested in it, they might not really want to work towards it. So there are people you just want to be able to keep satisfied in terms of understanding what is happening. Then in terms of high power and people who have high interest, those are the people now who can be able to make you have quick policy actions and quick decisions to be made. And those are the people who are at a position that they can be able to influence things. So those are the people you want to manage very closely. Then when you look at low power and low interest, so those are the people you just want to monitor, because also it's about prioritization. In life, we have limited time and limited resources. So you have to learn how to prioritize, and this is where now it comes in. So in this case, those who have low power and low interest, you want to put in minimum effort in that area, because that's not where you get most of your gains. Now, for the people who have low power but high interest, these are the people you want to keep informed. And I can just give, for example, in some cases, this could be media. They're very interested, they might have low power, but also this depends on the power that media has in your country. And that's where issues also of context come in, but you might want to always keep them informed in terms of what is happening. So in this case, if I were to say the Ministry of Health in terms of tackling issues of teenage pregnancy, where in the matrix would you put them? And you can just quickly all chat, type in your chat what your thoughts are. So I can see manage closely. Okay. Thank you, Genevieve. Thank you, Chuma. A few more answers. And it could be different from what Chuma and Genevieve are saying. Any other suggestions of where you would put them? Manage closely. Thank you, Pawan. Okay, Ifoma, thank you. Okay, so I can see manage closely seems to be one of the key areas. So I'd like to actually ask, and Genevieve, maybe if you don't mind, would you be able to explain why you would want to put them in the manage closely category? So I can't see the, yes, hi Genevieve.
Hello, yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I believe we have to manage them closely because for the Seychelles experience anyway, and I would like to believe that it's the same for every other country of the region. They are the focal point between us and parliamentarians. Parliamentarians have to liaise directly with the Ministry of Health with regards to the budget, especially the APHRC budget. And we always have to work very closely with them because we have the parliamentarians have to be able to have an oversight on their programs, on their budget, so as to be informed on what on how to be involved in budget allocation and so forth. In general, I think it's a rule that parliamentarians, if we are involved in the APHRC project and also the researchers, that we have to work closely with the Ministry of Health and any other health departments for that matter. So it is a managed closely situation, I believe. Thank you.
Meg, you are still muted. You are muted, Meg.
Thank you. You would think I would have caught on with Zoom by now and think of that. But yeah, so thank you so much, Genevieve, for sharing that. I I don't think I would even add anything extra to that, but you've highlighted it very clearly. These are the people who, in the end, if you're saying you want to increase contraceptives as access to contraceptives as a way to reduce the burden on teenage pregnancy, it's them who are going to actually be the implementers on the ground, what we call street bureaucrats. They're the ones who are going to be on the ground and doing it. So you want to manage them closely. So thank you for that. Just to go on, so how do you actually apply the results? So you've been able to do your matrix, you've been able to identify who you want to manage closely, keep informed, keep satisfied, and so on. So how you apply your results is you want to use it to shape the project or the policy. By being able to address the concerns raised by these different stakeholders, because now you'll be able to engage with them, then you'll be able to know what are their different concerns so that you can know what's the probability of success in terms of what I'm recommending, and then what's the best way for me to get buy-in so that they also feel sort of a sense of ownership and buy-in to the project and to the goals that you're trying to achieve. Then in terms of also just increasing support for policy reform and guiding participatory decision-making, you always want to make sure that people feel like they're contributing and they're making an effort towards advancement of these particular SRHR goals or policies. Because once people do feel like they're contributing, then they have that ownership and they have more motivation to see it through. This also would allow you to just increase stakeholder engagement, building consensus, and networking. Networks which I would support each other are very key in terms of being able to push and influence change from different angles, and also be able to identify change agents. So being able to identify who maybe within your parliament or who within the Ministry of Health is a crucial champion who can be able to understand the inner workings of, for example, whether it's Parliament or the Ministry of Health, and can be able to guide you in a way that is also somebody who's credible, who's trusted, whose opinion matters a lot and whose perspective matters a lot, that can be able to also champion things from the inside, because those are the people who are also very crucial. Then in terms of also now, I think mainly that's it. So doing a stakeholder analysis is not a one-time job. I think that's something which is very important to always remember. It's a dynamic process and needs to be revisited and revised throughout a project cycle. In some cases, you can use a worksheet, and so that your results can be you can be able to use and we'll show you actually. So APHRC has created a tool, a stakeholder mapping tool, which we've used with some of our CSO partners, and which can also be used in your case as well. And we can be able to share that with you. So you can see it's a spreadsheet, which can allow you to sort of do this mapping and be able to keep having that ranking process. And it's always important to know that some stakeholders will be less involved, new ones will emerge. So in terms of interest, it might go up and down. So you also have to be cognizant of that, but also cognizant of how do you still keep that motivation and that interest. And also fluidity. When you're thinking about all this and you're thinking about power and dynamics, you're thinking politics. So I always say you can never run away from politics. It's just part of the policy making process and the change process. So also just understanding how to manage that, and also not to be fully engaged in it, but how do you manage those the different political priorities that might exist. So I think that's it for the stakeholder analysis and mapping. However, I just want to also mention that we would be in a position to send you our tool, the tool which was created, and actually Collins created this, the tool which was created, so that you can also have a more in-depth look at it, and it has more details in terms of the different considerations that you need to have, and we can also send in more information in terms of the different tools that are out there for stakeholder mapping, if that's something that you're also interested in. So just feel free to let us know, and this is something we can be able to avail to you. So I was just checking if there's any questions in the chat before I hand it over to Grace. Over to you, Grace.
Thank you, Maggie.
And I can see Collins is on the call. I don't know if Collins, there's something you might want to add quickly before the internet goes off again. I'm sorry about that. In terms of the stakeholder mapping, or everything is good and we can go on.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. I think you have captured everything, but the most important thing, which I think you mentioned towards the end, was about ensuring that stakeholder analysis is done throughout the project cycle. So sometimes even when you are doing a concept note, you need to start doing a stakeholder analysis from their own. But even throughout project implementation and monitoring, stakeholder mapping has to go on. So thanks, I think you have represented me very well. Thanks and apologies again. Over.
No, thank you again for reiterating that, and no, it's understandable. So thank you for that. Colin, Grace, sorry, over to you.
Thank you, Maggie. And thank you, Collins. So I'm going to take you through the use of evidence in policy making. I know the whole morning we've been speaking about the use of evidence, messaging, and how to use the evidence. I know the examples that have been given have not been focused on APHRC. So what we're going to go through is instances where we've used our evidence in the policy making process, and it's actually resulted into policy change and impacting people. Maggie, please, the next slide. Okay, the Human Milk Bank, this is our flagship project where we did research on human milk banking. And our research showed that 44% of newborns who are born in urban health facilities were separated from their mothers for varying periods of time. Now, if we put this into context, like what Maggie said earlier, 44% would be about 4 children out of 10. So you can imagine 4 children are separated from their mothers at birth. And what does that mean for them? And why is human milk banking important? So our research also looked into the importance of the human milk bank. And we found that breastfeeding, as you may all know, is the most natural, gentle, and the best way to feed babies. But many babies, like we've seen, 4 out of 10 lack access to their mother's milk. And this could be for varying reasons. Maybe the mother is sick, so she's not able to breastfeed, or she has died, or she does not have enough breast milk. So this makes the lack of breast milk for babies, especially when they are born in the first 6 months, it makes them vulnerable, and it means that they don't have a healthy start to life. Next slide, Maggie. So our research is what led to the establishment of Kenya's first milk bank. And this is the second milk bank in sub-Saharan Africa. The first is in Southern Africa. And our work was a partnership between ourselves, an organization called PATH, and Kenya's Ministry of Health, and a couple of other partners. Now, if we look at those partners, we can see that the Kenya Ministry of Health is a policy maker. And like in the slides that Maggie took you through, the Ministry of Health had high power, high interest, so we had to manage them closely. Then in our research, we also assessed people's perception and their acceptance of using donated human milk. And we looked at how feasible it would be to set up the milk bank. So what the results showed us is that 90% of the participants were positive about using milk from the human milk bank. 80% of the mothers agreed that they would donate their breast milk, and then 60% would allow their children to be fed with donated human milk. You can see from those figures that the number of people who would allow their children to be fed with breast milk are far less than the ones who are positive about it, and they are also less than the ones who would agree to donate their breast milk. Next slide, Maggie, please. So what challenges did we encounter as we developed this research and put it into effect? So being a new concept, we had there were logistical challenges because the equipment was not readily available locally. So it had to be imported from abroad. But then because we were in partnership with the Ministry of Health, They helped to address the critical logistical challenges. And then there were concerns by some community members and health workers over the safety and the quality of the breast milk in the human milk bank. So some of the concerns were around hygiene, the safety, the expiry date. Is it very safe for a child to take milk from a woman who is not their mother? So how we resolve that is through advocacy and communication campaigns to create awareness on human milk banking and to address other concerns. So it's been running for about over a year. Next slide, please, Maggie. So what we found is that our evidence showed that there was a large number who were in favor of donated human milk over using expensive infant formula. And then human milk is more effective in reducing diseases and infections in newborn babies, especially when they are breastfed for 6 months exclusively. So it reduces diseases like inflammatory bowel disease, leukemia, and other respiratory tract infections. Then the human milk is better tolerated by babies that are born prematurely. And then there was a study that was done in the US and Brazil that found that the use of donated human milk was reported to reduce the length of stay in hospital. And this meant and translated into a saving on the cost of healthcare. And WHO recommends the setup of milk banks. And Kenya, like I said earlier, is the second country in sub-Saharan Africa to establish one. There's already one in South Africa. So from this research and the evidence we collected, we hope that human milk banking will be scaled up in Kenya and to other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, Maggie, please. So these are some of the reactions that we received from the mothers that we talked to as we were doing our research. There is one who said, if it is a matter of life and death, it's about saving the child. I will not sit and watch a baby die. In such a scenario, I will have the human heart to donate milk. Then there were others who are on the other side of the divide and they were asking, what are you going to do with my milk? Those are bad stories of people taking other people's hair, nails, and other body parts for undisclosed uses. So this is where the advocacy and communication campaigns came in, because you can see people's culture, their tradition, sometimes will not be in line with the policies that you're trying to put in place and with the changes that you're trying to make. Maggie, the next slide, please. So other examples of practical use of APHRC's evidence, and these examples we've taken from work that we've done with you. Like Maggie mentioned in the beginning, we have an MOU between ourselves and SADC-PF. And in the MOU, one of the services we offer is a rapid response service where we work with you to respond to your queries, maybe queries that you have from the parliamentarians that you work with on evidence that they need maybe for bills that are in parliament. So one of the examples is we're a member of the East African Community SRHR Regional Technical Committee, and we're part of the drafting of the EAC SRHR bill, and we're also developing an advocacy strategy for Sub-Saharan Africa. Then the next two examples are of the rapid response service that we offer. And the first one, this one, we worked with Chuma on a policy brief on child marriage, and it was the appraisal of Zimbabwe's proposed marriage bill 2019, which was presented at the opening of the Zimbabwean parliament in June. And the debates coming from this brief are still being tracked, so we're still waiting for feedback from Chuma on how that goes. Then another example is we drafted slides for the Parliament of Namibia on adolescent SRHR and ending teenage pregnancy and unsafe abortion for use in the regional sectoral policy dialogue. This is with religious leaders and traditional leaders from the 16 countries. Then we are also working on something with Chawapiwa on parental leave, specifically for the fathers, for new fathers. And then there's also something we're doing on SRHR situational analysis for the upcoming roundtables. So just to reiterate again, I hope you're not tired of hearing it, the rapid response service is open. So anytime you have a need or a request for evidence, please reach out to us and let us know what you need and we'll work on it with you. Next slide, Maggie, please. So who are we as APHRC? I'm sure most of you have interacted with us, and you know that we are the premier research institution in Africa, a think tank, and we are committed to generating African-led and an African-owned body of evidence to inform decision-making, policy-making, so that we respond to the most critical challenges that are facing the continent, and to help to transform Africans' lives living in Africa. So we are divided into 3 divisions, and the first one is research, the research division. And what it does is that it produces research and evidence that emphasize and look into the health and well-being of Africans in Africa. Then we have the research capacity strengthening division. What this one does is that it deepens the skills of African scholars working on the continent. Before APHRC was formed, it was found that a lot of the research that is done in Africa is usually done by people who are out of Africa, and they are not Africans. So one of the aims and the goals of APHRC is to strengthen the skills of African scholars so that they can produce African-led, African-owned research while working on the continent. Then the third division is a policy engagement and communications division, of which my colleagues and I are a part of. So what we do is we support the research that is produced and the evidence that's produced by our colleagues, so that we ensure that it can be used in the policy-making and decision-making process across sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, Maggie, please. So the project we are working on focuses on SRHR. It's called the Challenging the Politics of Social Exclusion, and it focuses on these 3 pillars. So our first pillar is research. How do we generate policy relevant evidence that can be used in the SRHR space? And when we work with you in the rapid response service, this is one of the pillars that we cover. We help and work with you to generate evidence that is relevant to your policy requirements. And the second pillar is using evidence to advocate for change. And that example I gave of the paper we wrote for the Zimbabwe Parliament is a perfect example of how evidence can be used to advocate for change in the marriage bill. Then the third pillar is strengthening capacity to use evidence and learning to achieve change. Now this pillar, an example is the training sessions that we've been having, like today's, is strengthening the capacity of policy actors in sub-Saharan Africa in the SRHR space. So this project, it's covered by both our research and policy engagement colleagues, and it's focused on SRHR, and it's funded by CEDA. Next slide, Maggie, please. Now, a few months ago, from March to June, we carried out research. It was a survey where we interviewed all our policy actors, and I think some of you must have responded to this survey. So what the survey looked at is, how does our evidence impact the policy process? So we wanted to get reactions, perceptions, views from all the people that we work with in the policy process. And some of the results include this. So what do policymakers want from APHRC? I don't know, Maggie, if you can make it, I don't know if it's clear for everybody, whether you can all see it clearly. So we can see that, okay, let me just give me a second. I go to the original so that I can speak to it from there. Okay, maybe there's a bar blocking the bottom part. I'm not able to see. Are you able to remove it? Okay, all right. So we can see these are the results we received from the people who responded. We surveyed 500 people, and this was across all of APHRC and the people we work with, our partners, policymakers, across all the countries that we work with. So we can see that 62.5% asked that we designed research with policy impact in mind. And then the next highest one, which was 48.86, asked that we provide short and less technical reports, because sometimes research reports are very technical, they're full of jargon, and it's not easy for policy actors, policymakers to understand. And sometimes the time is short and you want information that can be easily understood and can be easily be made sense of for policy actors and policymakers to use immediately. Then the next one, we were 46.59% were asked to cultivate relationships with policymakers, which is very important, because if you're going to influence the policy process, you have to first have relationships with policymakers so that they can even listen to you. Then this one was at par with, we were asked to use several channels to communicate our research findings. And then the next one asked that we provide more in-depth information. Then the others, the rest didn't know, and the others did not specify anything. So Maggie, go to the next slide, please. So in this question, we asked the policy actors what policy changes were influenced by APHRC's evidence. And we can see that 55.17% had 1 to 3 of their policy changes influenced by evidence. Then we had the next at 10, about 10%, had 4 to 6 of their decisions influenced by APR evidence. And then we had 6.9%, that's about 7%, had about 7 or more decisions influenced by our evidence. So this survey for us was an effort to see how is our work going? What is our evidence doing? Is it making a change? Is it adding value? Is it actually impacting and transforming people's lives? So this was critical for us to see how our evidence is making a difference in the lives of Africans in Africa. And I think that's the last slide. Maggie, over to you. I think you'll speak more about the rapid response service in addition to what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you so much. So just to build up on what Grace mentioned, and I know we reiterate this, but we would love you to know that about the rapid response service, which you've mentioned before, in terms of this is a service that's geared towards supporting the partners in terms of being able to access user-friendly evidence, to respond to your evidence requests in a timely manner. In a timely manner. So what we've done is we have developed a web page on our website, which I will share with you all on the chat. And through this web page, you can be able to send in your rapid response requests. And also you can see on the screen that there's an email to which you can be able to send the rapid response request should you have challenges with being able to access the web page. So, and like Grace has mentioned before, this is something we've already worked on, and we're looking forward to working on more and being able to just support you more and more in this process, to be able to just get that information in a quick, rapid, user-friendly manner. Yes, so I think that's mainly it. I will definitely share the links for this webpage, the email, everything with you so that you can be able to read. Other than that, we've come to the end of our session. So any questions and answers? And I'll just stop sharing here. Thank you, Geoffrey. Questions, answers, comments. We've already identified that we want, so Chuma, yes, that we want to have more trainings in terms of data visualization. Which is something we'll definitely put in our training module schedule. So Chuma, then Geraldina, you can go ahead and ask your questions.
Oh, no, I didn't have a question, apparently. Probably I left my...
Okay, so I'll lower your hand. Okay, no problem.
But I was actually asking in the chat box. So the hand was not on. Yeah, I was just checking on... I was responding to Grace's presentation when she was, oh, by the way, you want the video. All right. When Grace was talking about the examples, when she was mentioning Zimbabwe, I was actually saying, yeah, The bill is still on, is still up for debate, and it's still in the Senate because we have a bicameral parliament, like 2 houses. So I was saying that, interesting enough, it was told around issues of payment of bride or price. So I was actually checking if anybody has done some work around that, and put some information interesting about things. Maybe now we need to influence that so that that hurdle is passed, so that the bill which contains our child marriage issues is passed. So now people are stuck around payment of lobola, because the bill was saying people for a marriage to be recognized now, it's not a prerequisite that son-in-law to be must pay some bridal price. So they're still trying to negotiate, and so they've kind of like sidelined the bill now, focusing on other things because they face the hurdle. Yeah, to begin with, the minister wanted to pass. Yeah, so yeah, indeed, it's very important to have this. So I look at myself like I've never read anything about bridal prices, but I've heard a long time ago activism, people talk about this, but I don't have the information now to try and also help the parliamentarians to get the bill moving. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Tuman. It's good to hear the progress where it's at. And I think, yeah, if you do something we can definitely discuss more, then let's discuss more with the rest of the team on how to try and synthesize information out there on this. Yeah. Geraldina?
Sim, boa tarde. Eu vou falar em português, que é a língua oficial em Moçambique. E, uma vez mais, agradecer esta oportunidade de formação e poder partilhar algumas realidades que estão a ser levadas a cabo a nível da nossa região. E este tema em particular tocou-me porque é importante trazer que Moçambique também já abraçou esta causa. Em Moçambique foi instalado em outubro de 2018 um banco de dados, para um banco de leite materno, para permitir apoiar as crianças prematuras. Dizer que este banco de dados trouxe esperanças de alimentação para muitas crianças órfãs e demais com dificuldades para o aleitamento materno. Abriu também grandes expectativas para a redução da mortalidade infantil, sobretudo em bebês prematuros. Lamentavelmente, nós só temos ainda este banco de dados a nível da província de Maputo, que é a cidade, a nível da cidade de Maputo, que é a capital do país. É importante haver esse esforço para se expandir estes serviços. E existem ainda muitas crianças que carecem destes serviços. Então, a nível da cidade de Maputo, também foram criadas brigadas móveis para permitir que os jovens voluntários possam fazer a coleta destes dados nos bairros onde as mães com mães dadoras, com leite em abundância, para poder doar essas crianças. Dizer também que, a média, mensalmente, coleta-se cerca de 30 litros de leite e temos um universo de mais ou menos 400 mulheres a fazerem esta doação. Dizer que este apoio para Moçambique este projeto foi apoiado pelo Programa das Nações Unidas para a População, Nações Unidas para o Desenvolvimento, Agência Brasileira de Cooperação e Departamento Britânico para o Desenvolvimento Internacional. Mas precisamos englobar dentro também das agendas parlamentares para permitir que este serviço possa ser replicado para os distritos, para os círculos eleitorais. Muito obrigada. Eu queria partilhar este avanço que Moçambique teve e parabenizar a apresentadora por este tema, porque este tema é muito pertinente. Não só devemos olhar para a questão de providenciar os direitos, a saúde e os direitos sexuais para os adolescentes e jovens, mas também é importante ter este serviço, porque na maior parte das raparigas que, infelizmente, acabam engravidando muito cedo, elas têm dificuldades de produzir o leite por conta da condução de nutrição, da própria saúde desta rapariga, mesmo pela fisionomia do próprio corpo. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, and thank you for sharing that. And it's good to know that Mozambique is actually also has made steps towards this. I don't know if Grace would have any feedback on that you'd like to respond to.
No feedback, but thank you, Geraldina, for sharing that. It's important to note.
I see Jabu has her hand up. Jabu, you can go ahead. So Jabu, I think Jabu disappeared?
Thank you. Thank you,
Jabu,
Tim.
okay.
A very good afternoon. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now, Jabu.
There. I just want to appreciate this session, this training. It was so informative indeed. And I just want to echo in terms of communication, how it transforms political will from what I've seen on the ground. We used pictorials. We visited a foster care home where we found young children and young girls subjected to a lot of
maybe
trauma.
You can type the question in the chat.
In terms of SRHR issues. Hello? And
yes,
what you can hear me. And what we noted is that we had the media people with art, so there were pictures to reflect what we found in there in terms of communication and pictorials. And I want to echo in relation to Grace's presentation that evidence in policymaking and it changes and impacts on people that after what we saw
Maggie,
on the
I can't
ground.
hear her. I'm not sure if I'm the only one.
Yeah, I can hear her.
Maggie?
Okay.
Yes, I can hear her. Yes, I can share with you, Grace. So Grace is just having a hard time hearing you, but you can go ahead, Jabu, and I'll share with her. Yeah.
So I was saying we visited a foster care where there were young girls and young children, 0 to 3 years. And then we're with the media, so they publicize that information with the notion that media can highly transform political will. That's where I am. And linking that with the issue of evidence in policymaking, it changes and it can impact on people. After that press release from the foster care, we had our line ministry responsible for gender and youth, responsible on how best to review the issue of foster care in the country in terms of regulating, in terms of monitoring, in terms of how best to align the principles of etiquette and integrity on the provision of SRHR issues. And as I speak, we have guidelines to do with how best regulations can be in place to do with foster care and how best these kids who are there can be integrated into society. So I just want to echo that and thank this presentation to SADC PF and all our APHRC stakeholders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jabu. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to always also hear from you how you've been able to utilize this in the work that you're doing, and that you yourselves have seen the impact that using evidence in policymaking can actually have. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for highlighting that. Yes, I can see there are no other questions or comments. I can see the Oliva has a comment to Grace. Maybe Moses or Aziz, you can interpret to us in English what she's just shared on the chat. Mm-hmm. Mm. Sorry. I think there's two people talking at the same time. I can hear two. I think I can hear both. Yeah, so maybe I don't know who was talking. Okay, go ahead, Aziz. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Over to you, Grace.
Thank you, Liva. I think I'll throw that question to you, Maggie.
So I know usually they tend to, when in terms of natural milk, you can be able to refrigerate it. And I think you can be able to refrigerate it for probably less than 4 days. So there is, you have to consider in terms of the fact that it's something that can go bad quickly if not used in time. So yeah, there is an expiry date. And I think one thing we can also do is, this always seems to have a lot of people are always very interested in this. Every time Grace makes this presentation, it seems everyone want more details on it. So maybe we can also share like the briefs or the research that was done that can be able to also offer you more detailed information in terms of how that whole process that we've undertaken from the research to the policy. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Maybe just to add that normally it's kept under 4 degrees centigrade, which takes around 4 days.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 4 days. Thank you for that, Collins. Okay, so any other questions or comments before we close? Okay. So thank you so much. I think we can end it here, but I think from our end, we want to say thank you so much for being able to make it for this session. I'll give it to Grace to close the meeting. I can see she's, but thank you so much for attending the session. We definitely have taken in terms of also input, what we would be sharing with you and what we need to plan for future trainings. We also have learned from you in terms of what is currently going on and how we can also best support you. So we're always here to support you. Always feel free to reach out to us, like Grace had mentioned. And thank you again. Thank you so much to you all, the interpreters, the SADC PF team in the background, Kurasha, Paulina, Ronald. Thank you to all of you for just being so cooperative and so supportive to make this happen. Thank you, Madam SG, for also providing this platform for us. So I'll hand it over to Grace. And thank you to our facilitators.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you for facilitating, and thank you, everyone. And thank you especially for staying throughout and for being responsive, for interacting, for making it interesting. And thank you, Madam SG, for gracing our session. And thank you to Patterson. Something he didn't tell you, he's the Director for Policy Engagement and Communications. So in other words, he's our boss. So thank you, Patterson. And thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Collins. Thank you, Patterson, for the presentations. Just one thing I'd like to reiterate. The Rapid Response Service, it's open for all of you. It's open for all your evidence and research requests. Please make use of it. We're here to provide you with the evidence that you need when you're working with parliamentarians, when you're working with your other partners and other stakeholders. So please make use of it. We are ready to work with you. Like I said earlier, there's an MOU between SADC PF and APHRC to work together. So we have 2 other sessions. The next one, like Maggie has put on the chat, is on the 27th of November. And then we'll have another one on the 9th of December. And then for next year, we have a couple more that are scheduled. And like Maggie mentioned in the beginning, there'll be certificates that we will issue for each of these sessions that we've had. We already had the first one in October. So this is the second. We have 2 more for this year. And we're looking forward to working with you. And then there's one request. I know I had made the request to Kurasha. We know that there are also areas where we can learn from you. And the way we had envisioned this MOU is that we would do co-creation, even in capacity strengthening. So there's a session that we're really looking forward to. Maggie and I had attended last year. It's on how to work with parliamentarians. It was covered by a couple of you. I know Chuma was there. Ndamu was there, and a couple of others. So this should be a two-way process whereby we're learning from each other. So those are some of the sessions that we're looking forward to. And we look forward to seeing you on the 27th and on the 9th of December. I don't know whether there's anybody who would like to say something before we close. Going. Please raise your hand if you want to say something. Okay, I guess we are all happy. So enjoy your lunch and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Enjoy your virtual lunch too, Grace.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, and thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Asante sana.
Bye.
Karibu.
Thank you, Grace. It was good.
Kani mambo.
Thank you, Jabu.
Kani mambo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. What language is that? Sorry.
Mickey, someone has put in the chat that it's Chuma who has put in the chat that you send the link to the rapid response.
Yes. Let me do that right now. I will send it also via email just in case. Yeah.
In the report will only be found. Yes, no.
It's not in anything. So here it is.
It's not. That's recommended.
Kanimambo. What
There you
language
go.
is it? Okay, keep repeating.
Okay.
That's not
Things
good.
have made playlist as well.
Can say your last word.
I'm in the meeting. Grace.
Yes, Kurasha.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Do we still
Fine,
have...
thanks. We are pressed with plenary.
Oh yeah, because it's in December.
Some
Yes.
have not left
First
yet.
week.
Yeah,
But
I saw the
this,
invite.
I'm happy this went well.
Yes. Yeah, it went very well.
I was waiting if there was an explosion, then I was going to catch the bullet.
There was no explosion. It went very well.
That's why I didn't have to come in and catch any bullets.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yes. Aziz, Moses, Gilberto. Yes, you're free to leave. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you.
All
See you on
right.
27th.
I think we are on good footing. We need to plan in advance for next year. So before we close, we need to have conversations around what we should restructure for next year, and
yes.
of it need best. I think we need to do something on social media as well. We remember
the social media will be covered on the 27th. It's part of that training. Yeah.
And we need to carry it into next year as well.
That's fine. We can do another session, maybe a build-up to what will be covered on the 27th.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Otherwise, all the best.
Thank you. And let's look into those sessions I mentioned, like how to work with policymakers, how to work with parliamentarians. Those ones will be very useful for our colleagues, because most of us work with policymakers and parliamentarians across sub-Saharan Africa.
By all means, we are Sisonge, we are one.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Mungu akubariki sana.
Asante, nawe pia.
Oh.
Okay. Maggie, we can end the meeting.